This podcast contains some strong language and some stories involving violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Warfighters United, where veterans' voices are heard and transitional resources and programs provided. This podcast is brought to you by the Veterans of Foreign Wars, a service organization that provides our military and veterans resources and representation to our warfighters throughout the nation. They provide community support and the camaraderie we all miss being in the military. Join the VFW today and make a difference. In studio today, I have not only a true American patriot, spent 4 years in Vietnam, and he came back and he has dedicated his life to the Veterans of Foreign Wars, 40 years being a service officer, and now our state quartermaster, Barry Walters. Barry, welcome to Warfighters United.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I was so excited to get you on the cast today because getting our veterans into the VFW is something that I'm very passionate about and something that you also are very passionate about. And just this year, we've actually hit an all-time high. Is that correct?
Well, in terms of percentage we have, our numbers are significantly, our total numbers are significantly lower than they were in the mid-90s, for instance. Because of the high death rate of World War II veterans and Korean War veterans that made up a large part of our membership back then. But in the last several years, we've had 3 out of 4 years of membership growth. And this year we hit, as you said, an all-time high in terms of percentage. And continuing to march forward with those numbers. It's really exciting right now.
I was very excited this weekend at the state convention when we were talking about how many posts hit a higher percentage than ever before, especially with all the All-American posts as well.
Oh, yeah. Today, as of this morning, we have 100 posts that are over 102% in membership compared to last year. And we have 44 posts that have made All-American status, with a couple more to come.
And so when you say All-American, what does that mean?
Well, All-American status, in order to achieve All-American status, a post first has to show growth. They have to hit that 102% membership mark compared to last year, but they also have to demonstrate their willingness to participate in community service programs and other programs of the VFW in order to show that they're a well-rounded post, not just participating in one or more activities, but rather that they're a well-rounded VFW post in their community involvement.
Well, I'm just so glad that we're hitting those marks and we're starting to move up. And so let's back up here. Back in 1966, and this year being the 50th year anniversary of Vietnam, what was it like to be a young soldier being drafted and knowing you were going to Vietnam?
Well, it was a unique time. The draft was very active. I was going to college at the time, and as a lot of young guys at that time, first time away from home, did a little bit of partying maybe in that first year of college, and I lost my student deferment.
Okay.
And I got a letter from Central Michigan University that they, Dear Barry, we've revoked your student deferment. We're reporting you to your county draft board. And it was just about exactly 30 days later that I got a kind letter from the county draft board that said, welcome. And so I went down to see them. And sure enough, they said, yeah, you're going to get drafted. Your number's going to be up in about a month here. And so you need to prepare yourself. And I said, well, what am I looking at? And they said, well, you're probably going to go to Vietnam. And sure enough, exactly 30 days later, I got an invitation. And true to their word, they sent me to Vietnam. They took, that day, they took 36 guys out of Shiawassee County. in the draft. We filled a bus, and it was a pretty good shock to the system.
Yeah,
you know?
I bet.
They at the draft board, they said, "Yeah, don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to get ready." She said, "You'll go down and you'll take an exam, and they'll send you back home after you have the exam, and then they'll give you a date to report." Well, I got out of work about 2 o'clock in the morning. I went down to the bus station, got on the bus about 5 o'clock, and got down to Fort Wayne. And next thing you know, I'm raising my hand, and I said, "Wait a minute! They said I'd have some time." "Yeah, you got about an hour, and you'll be on a train to Fort Knox, Kentucky. That's how much time you got." I had to call my dad, tell him to go get my car, because I left it at the bus station. He says, "Where are you at?" I said, "I'm at Fort Wayne, Detroit, on my way to Fort Knox, Kentucky." "What are you doing there?" I said, "I got drafted today." He didn't even know I was going down for my exam.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it was a different time. It really was.
Yeah, so you go down there and you do, you were in the artillery wing?
I wound up in the artillery, fire direction.
Is that why you're so good with numbers, since you're our state quartermaster?
I don't know why. Maybe it was because I like to make big noise. I don't know.
And so you went over to Vietnam.
Yep.
And what was that like? You talk about it being a shock to the system. You've never really traveled anywhere, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a foreign land with a whole bunch of other GIs that were also drafted, and not sure if they wanted to be there as well, but you guys were stuck into a situation. I mean, what was that like?
Generally speaking, for the most part, for my basic training unit, my AIT unit, for the most part, we were draftees. We weren't all draftees, but for the most part, we were. And we were pretty accepting of, okay, this is what it is. And some of us were a little bit more politically astute, if you will, than others, but the draft resistance, if you will, that we became prevalent in '67 and '68 and after, that hadn't started yet. That really wasn't alive and well as a movement yet. And so 66, 67, we were pretty accepting of our situation, and our focus was do our job and bring everybody back home. That was the mentality, and for the most part, I think that everybody that I worked with, that I had the opportunity to serve with in Vietnam, did exactly that. They did their job, and with one purpose in mind: do it the best they possibly could and bring everybody back home.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. I read about Vietnam, and even going over on my tours, that I feel like it's nothing compared to what you guys were dealing with in the jungle, and especially with the NVA being so prevalently large at certain times. And you were talking about the movement. It was probably the Tet Offensive that really got that movement going throughout the United States? Yeah.
I arrived in Vietnam in the first week of August of '67. And I was in what was known as 2 Corps in the Central Highlands. And it was a pretty active area. And when Tet occurred January the 30th and 31st, We were surprised. We were shocked at the ferocity of the offensive. And where we were at was a main infiltration route of the NVA into that central highland area of Vietnam. And so we encountered a significant force. And those from the 1st of February until June or July of '68, it was pretty rough.
I could only imagine.
It was pretty rough.
Now, what propelled you? So most guys that were drafted, they do their 365 days. I mean, you did 47 months in Vietnam. What was the thought behind you staying there for that long and doing how much good you did?
Well, I was drafted, and my time in the Army was going to be up in July of '68. And I got injured, and I was in the hospital and in Pleiku, and I had this fast-talking re-enlistment NCO come by, and he said, "Do you like what you're doing?" I said, "Oh, I don't like what I'm doing." And he said, "Well, you like the guys you're with?" And I said, "I had a good crew. I was chief." And I had an excellent crew. I said, "Yes, he says, you want to make sure they all get home?" I said, "Darn right, I want to make sure they all get home." And what are you going to do when you get out of here? I said, "I'm going back to them." He says, "Do you want to go home on leave?" I said, "I'd love to go home on leave, I'd love to go. I'm going to get out in a couple of months. I'll go home right now, And he said, "Well, I'll send you home with money in your pocket." And I said, "Well, how do I have to do that?" "Oh, you got." Well, I'll be honest with you. My brother had just gotten drafted.
Okay.
And instead of accepting the draft, he went down and he enlisted when they had that opportunity. If you get drafted, you can re-enlist and get to choose, have some choices that when you get drafted that you didn't have. And he was going to be coming to Vietnam. There's no doubt in my military mind. That wasn't going to happen. That was not going to happen. My brother was not going to do what I did. He was not going to have to live what I went through. And so I said, "I'll extend." I re-enlisted, and I took his money, and I extended, and I came home on that leave. And then I went back. And I went back to the same unit that I left, same crew. And when that extension was up, I just felt that I needed to finish what I started. And so I extended again. And 6 months later, I extended again. And after a while, before I knew it, it was coming up on 4 years.
Wow.
It just was, and I honestly, as I lived it, I don't know where the time went. But all of a sudden, it was coming on 4 years. Well, they had a little rule at the time that you couldn't spend more than 48 months in country.
Oh, I didn't know about that rule.
So I filed my paperwork to extend. Colonel called me in. He says, "Can't do it."
So you would have extended again if they would have let you.
Paperwork. I filed the paperwork, but they rejected it because it would have put me over 48 months. So I came home and got assigned to Fort Lewis, Washington. And
what was that flight coming home after 4 years of being in Vietnam? You know, when I was talking to a couple other Vietnam vets, like Sammy Davis, when he hit Washington, they made them all change over. They couldn't wear their uniforms home because there was such a bad deal going on here in the United States against our service members by the public. And so he was telling me that they made them all the guys that were with him that were flying home with him, they made them go to the PX. They all had white tees that were, everybody had the same thing.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't let them wear their uniforms home and be proud of what they did.
It was hard. Now, when I came home in '68, coming through the reprocessing station at Fort Lewis, they issued us brand new khakis. You got a travel voucher and a steak and a brand new uniform.
They gave you a steak.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, steak dinner, and you got your travel voucher, a steak dinner, and a brand new uniform. And that's what you wore. And about a year later, I came home on leave again, and noticeable change. Noticeable change. I got another steak dinner.
You did?
Yes, I did.
Well, at least they have that for you.
But you could wear civilian clothes. You didn't have to get on a plane in uniform. And I remember the first time walking through SeaTac Airport, home on leave, wearing a uniform, and I'm walking down the hallway looking for a gate. And there was a little girl walking with her mother. And she's walking towards me, and the mother pulled the little girl off to the side so that she didn't have to walk next to me.
That just disgusts me inside.
And I was, boy, I wonder what... Well, by the time I got home, I had it all figured out.
Yeah.
Things were a little bit different than they were when I left. And while I was in the hospital in 1968, of course, Martin Luther King was killed, and then Robert Kennedy was killed. And it was... We, in Vietnam, we didn't get that kind of news in the same way that it was being broadcast. We didn't have access to it. Stars and Stripes was a little bit edited. Armed Forces Radio was really edited.
Yeah.
You know, you just didn't get it, but you got it when you got home.
See, and I can understand why they wouldn't want to put that out there while you guys were over there serving and fighting for our country.
Yeah.
You know, that part makes a little bit of sense because, you know, morality while you're serving is, you know, having a high morale between you and your men mean the world to when you go into a firefight or a battle.
Yeah. But it was when I came home in '71, things were really different in the public about Vietnam, and with starting the wind down, President Nixon's announcement of withdrawal, and finally concluding, there was a definite force in the country of disengagement. You know, they wanted us out. I think, and there was a significant number of Vietnam veterans that came home and got involved with the Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and it was just a time, and you had to have lived it to kind of appreciate what we were going through.
Well, I can say with all the rest of America nowadays, we totally appreciate all of our Vietnam veterans. And, if you guys are ever out there and you see a guy with a Vietnam veteran's hat, go over and shake his hand and say thank you for his service. Make sure that they are remembered throughout our nation.
I had a gentleman come in the office this morning and lives here in Lansing, Persian Gulf veteran. And he said, I just retired, and I got time to get involved, and I'd like to join the VFW. And so we were talking. I said, when did you serve? And he told me, he's a Marine and served in the Persian Gulf. And he said, when did you serve? And Vietnam. And he said, boy, you guys made it easy for us. If there was one piece of our service that came out good, it was the recognition that we were not going to let happen to another generation of veterans be treated the way we were treated. And I think that as a group, Vietnam veterans as a whole, and organizations, the VFW, American Legion, the DAV, and all the other veterans organizations had a single mindset that we were not going to let happen to your generation of veterans what happened to our generation of veterans. And we did everything we could to make sure that they were acknowledged for their service, whether we politically agreed with what they did or why why we were there. That didn't matter. It didn't matter. What mattered was they wore the uniform and they did their duty, and they were proud of it. And we wanted to make sure that they knew that we were proud of their service. And I think we still feel that. I think as an organization we continue to try to express to your generation how thankful we are that you were willing to serve. Without that draft, you still signed up.
And then I'm getting choked up just talking with you about it. But you guys, if it wasn't for you guys standing up and having that unity, who knows where we'd be at today. And you guys hit that out of the park. Because I know when I came home on my first tour in 2003, after the invasion of Iraq, we flew into Massachusetts, and there must have been 200 people lining as we walked through.
Yep. And
clapping and cheering us on. Of course, all we were thinking was, where's the first bar at?
Been there, done that.
Yeah. And then we flew over to March Air Force Base, and they had all the white buses waiting for us, and it was 3:30 in the morning, and you wouldn't believe the people in 29 Palms and on the way up the 5 in Riverside. Even at 3:30 in the morning, they knew that we were coming home on their 6 buses of us. Yeah. And they were waving the American flag. They had the true Americanism that you guys didn't have.
Yeah.
And if you guys wouldn't have stood up and did what you did, who knows if that would have happened.
Well, the Welcome Home slogan means a lot. And Vietnam veterans, we constantly are welcoming each other home. And I think that you can't say it enough, whether it be from our generation of veterans to your generation of veterans or to each other. I had an opportunity a couple of weeks ago to go to a nursing home in Chesterfield Township, down by Detroit, and present some certificates to World War II veterans that were reaching milestones of 100 years old.
Wow.
And glad to have that opportunity. But as part of that, to reach out to them and thank them for their service, for the service of that greatest generation. The glow in their face when they hear that recognition. I hope that people can see that in me when they extend that to me, because it's the way I feel. I feel grateful for that recognition and the opportunity that I have because of my job to reach out and recognize veterans of prior generations for their service, World War II, Korea, the Cold War peacetime veterans, if you will. They all deserve that same welcome home, that same recognition, and thank you for their service.
And, I got to watch that firsthand this weekend at our state convention when our state commander, Kimberly Napoleon, one of her last things before she passed the gavel on to the next state commander, she wanted to make sure that she bring in the Michigan Veteran Affairs Agency, and you guys gave away certificates one by one honoring the Vietnam veterans that were in our group.
Yep.
And so tell me a little bit about that certificate for other Vietnam veterans that don't know anything about that.
Thank you for that plug. The state of Michigan, the governor, has authorized the state adjutant general to recognize every Vietnam-era veteran by presenting to them a certificate recognizing their Vietnam-era service, whether they served in country or not. If they served during the Vietnam era between 1961 and 1975, the governor will present to them a certificate acknowledging their service and thanking them for their service. We had the opportunity this weekend to present 35 of those individual citations signed by the governor and signed by the adjutant general. And you were in the audience, and there were another 35 Vietnam veterans that were in the audience that we didn't know for sure that would be there. We didn't have the opportunity to apply for them for their certificates in advance, but I got their names now. We're working on their citations, and they will be presented to them as well. Every Vietnam veteran from Michigan that wants that certificate can go online to apply on the MVAA website. It's the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency website, and there's an application that they can fill out online and provide a copy of their upload a copy of their DD-214 and receive that recognition. Or they can contact one of the organizations like our office, and we will do it for them. And so if there's any Vietnam-era veterans out there that whether they served in country or not, and they would like that recognition, we'd love to help them make sure that they get that recognition from the state of Michigan that the governor has made available. And, of course, Vietnam veterans are eligible for the Vietnam Veteran Pin that's been out for a couple of years, but they're still presenting them. So any Vietnam veteran that has not received that recognition, we'd love to help assist them in getting that.
Yeah, and so if you're a family member and you have a father, a grandfather, or you want to honor them because of their service in Vietnam, they can even go online.
They can.
And fill out that paperwork, or, call one of the service organizations to make sure that their losses, their fight, their war in Vietnam was never forgotten, and it's always in our hearts and minds.
Yeah. The online application can be submitted by the veteran, can be submitted by a family member on the veteran's behalf, and have it mailed to whatever address they want it mailed to, so that it can be presented in a manner in which they wish it to be presented. We've got a number of VFW posts that are preparing the applications, and they're going to collect the citations and do it in a community ceremony. So just about any way that you want to do it, they can do it. And it's not just for living Vietnam veterans. If a family member has lost a Vietnam veteran due to illness or whatever, if they've lost a family member that served in Vietnam and they would like that citation in their memory, they can also apply for that as a surviving family member. So once again, every family deserves to have their veteran recognized for the service that they performed.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Veterans, don't leave benefits on the battlefield. VetServe delivers intel, firepower, and follow-through from VA mortgage loans and real estate to financial services and disability. Deploy to vetserve.us.
So you get out of the military, you get out of the Army. What propelled you to start becoming a service officer for the VFW?
Well, first of all, I didn't have a choice. My father was active in the VFW, and after I was in Vietnam for 90 days, I got my membership card in the mail. So I became a member of the VFW by default, because my like I said, my dad was active in the VFW, and I grew up in the VFW hall. I did. I grew up calling bingo at the age of 5, sitting on my dad's lap.
Really?
Yeah. Couldn't get away with that now. State of Michigan rules wouldn't let it. But yeah, I grew up picking up brass on Memorial Day, running around after the firing squad and doing all those things, And VFW, very frankly, was part of my life growing up. And so it was no surprise to me when I got my VFW card in the mail. And when I got out of the service in 1974, I went to my very first VFW meeting. Been a member for 7 years and attended my first VFW meeting in 1974 and got elected senior vice. And I should have seen the handwriting on the wall. But a couple of years after that, I got married and had a son. And my son was born with a number of birth defects. Well, at the time, I was working in a Ford garage. And my son was, like I said, born with some birth defects. None severe, thank God.
Do you attribute that to Agent Orange?
Well, we didn't know. When my son was born in 1979, Agent Orange was
not a thing back then.
Not a thing, but there was this group called Vietnam Veterans of America that was making noise about Agent Orange. And so I started reading about it. And by the time, a year later, the end of 1980, I just decided I wanted to do something different with my life than sell spark plugs. Nothing wrong with selling spark plugs. I love to sell spark plugs. I was a good salesman for spark plugs, by the way. I sold a lot of them. But it affected me. I wanted to know, did what I do cause my son's problems? I didn't know.
Right.
But I wanted some answers, and nobody had any. Nobody had any answers. We're talking 1979, 1980.
Of course.
Nobody knew. There was all kinds of maybes, but nobody knew. So I quit my job on New Year's Eve. December 31st, I quit my job. I walked in, put the keys down, said, I'm done. December 31st, 1980 was a Saturday.
Can't believe you remember.
Oh, I remember. And Monday then, of course, was a legal holiday. So on Tuesday, I called the VFW service office director in Detroit and said, I'm an unemployed Vietnam veteran and I need a job. And he said, I don't have anything for you today. I said, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. And I did. I called him the next day. I called him every day for a month. He said, you're not going to stop, Eric. I said, no, I'm not going to stop. He said, well, I guess you better come in.
and that determination paid off.
Yeah. My first day of work with the VFW was February the 2nd, 1981. And I've been working for the VFW ever since.
And, was it 1982 that you were invited down to the Vietnam Wall to give a speech?
Well, not to give a speech. I was, at the time, the state commander of the VFW was a Vietnam veteran. He was the first Vietnam veteran to serve as state commander of the VFW. And he asked if I wanted to go to Washington for the dedication of the Vietnam Veteran Memorial in November of 1982. And I said, yeah, you bet. He said, okay, you're the VFW representative. And so he sent a letter to the director of the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund asking that I be recognized as being the representative of VFW. And they did. They gave me a nice letter,
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the opportunity to, on behalf of the VFW, to be the VFW representative at the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in November of 1982. Got to march in the parade and I'll take part in all the festivities, but it was an emotional week to be part of that and to look back on it and have that memory to have been part of that very important to us as Vietnam veterans, that very important recognition of the dedication of that memorial. It was a unique experience. I'm forever grateful to have had that opportunity.
And yeah, I've been down to that wall, and what's so unique about that is when you walk down and you're by that wall, everything else dies out. It's complete silence. I mean, it gives me the chills just thinking about it.
When you're in that V, when you, as you said, you walk down into it. And when you walk down that little hill into the center of that V, and everything is above you, ground level is above you, for the acoustics of that just shut out everything else. And all you see is that wall. All you hear is that wall. It's an emotional experience.
Yes.
It really is. And I think that experience that your generation, your veterans, your generation of veterans that have visited that wall have been a motivation for you for the creation of the Desert Storm Memorial that is being built as we speak. It was the impetus for the World War II Memorial. It was the impetus for the Korean War Memorial. And so it served a purpose, more than just recognition of Vietnam veterans, but a focal point for the other memorials that also needed to be erected to recognize the greatest generation, that generation of Korean War veterans that are referred to as the forgotten veteran.
Yes.
And now the Desert Storm Memorial that's being built. So to look back on that week and say, boy, not only was I able to take part in that, but I can see what it started.
The catalyst of a lot of things. It
was a catalyst for a lot of other recognition that was long put off.
And so with Agent Orange, it took almost 45 years to get Agent Orange recognized. I think it was probably 2006, 2007 when they actually...
recognition was in 1998.
98.
Or correction, that's not true. 1988. With the recognition of diabetes as being the result of exposure to Agent Orange. But then it was after that, it was a number of years before additional disabilities were gradually recognized as being the result of exposure. But the Agent Orange Act of 1988 started that process. And provided a mechanism by which, in that legislation, provided the mechanism by which the VA still operates today of how to recognize additional presumptive conditions. And just in 2023, as part of the Pact Act,
yes,
additional disabilities were added as a result of exposure to Agent Orange as part of the Pact Act. And additional areas of exposure were identified, such as Guam and other areas. So it has been a evolving process.
Well, and that process kind of, when you talk about the Pact Act, when we talk about Iraq and Afghanistan vets, you talk about the powdered dust that was always, shooting up to our feet, or the burn pits, or all of the things that we were breathing in. And thank God it didn't take us 45 years because of what you guys have been doing with legislature, VFWs, American Legions, and all the organizations standing up to say, hey, we shouldn't have to wait that long to look into this. And you guys have conquered that almost in 20 years, where it took almost 45 for you guys.
Right. The Pact Act in 2023, was it 23 or 22? 22. It was 22. The Pact Act in August of 2022 was the culmination of a lot of hard work by the veterans organizations to ensure that Congress recognized the effects of particulate exposure, the breathing in of the toxic dust and from the burn pits and from the environment. When the original thought process was in 2017, they started recognizing that, okay, there's this thing called Gulf War disease and Gulf War exposures, but nobody could really put a finger on it. Well, the Pact Act brought all that together. And we're grateful that the organizations, the American Legion, the VFW, and the DAV, and others made sure that you didn't wait what we waited for. But at the same time, it was not soon enough, and it's not enough. There continues to be the need for additional VA case studies looking at the long-term effects that your generation was exposed to, whether it be the depleted uranium exposure that from the first Persian Gulf War,
yep,
to the particulate matter exposure and burn pit exposures from the Iraq and Afghanistan. Those should not have to wait until people start dying from chronic diseases before they're recognized. And thank goodness Congress has started that process. And now we've got to hold the feet of the VA to the fire to make sure that they do the right thing based on the information that they're given, and not wait until somebody forces them to do it. And I think for the most part, the VA is trying to do that within the scope of the law, but I think there's always more that could and should be done.
I totally agree with you. So if you're a veteran out there, why is it so important to, be a part of the Pact Act as an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran?
Well, if they served during that period of time, they need to contact the VA. The VA will provide them with an environmental exam, environmental exposure exam, to look at what's going on with them medically. They're eligible for medical care. They're eligible for that environmental exposure exam, and making sure that those veterans that had those exposures, that if they've got some chronic disease process going on, that it's recorded. And one of the ways that we got some of the disabilities we got as a result of exposure to Agent Orange is by the sheer number of veterans from Vietnam that started to have the same kind of problems. Well, you don't know those things unless you collect the data. And for Vietnam veterans, they started collecting the data from death certificates. Well, you know what? It's too damn late when you start collecting data from death certificates.
I agree completely.
You need to start collecting data from the guys while they're still alive. And that's the purpose of the environmental exposure exam process. And every VA medical center has the ability to bring you in, give you that environmental exam, and it's a good exam. They'll, from both a medical history perspective and from an examination perspective, try to identify what's going on with you. Maybe you find something you didn't even know you had.
That's usually the case.
We had Vietnam veterans that were diagnosed with prostate cancer because they went through the exam process. They didn't know they had it. And they go through the exam process, and the doctor you get a letter in the mail that says, we got the results of your exam, and you need to come back and see us.
Mm-hmm.
And doggone it, they were diagnosed with prostate cancer. We had veterans that were diagnosed with leukemias that they didn't know they had, simply because they went through the exam process. And I, just as sure as I'm sitting here and you're standing there, you know as well as I do, there's guys out there that if they go through that exam process, they're going to find that they have some issues related to their exposures as well.
And it could end up saving their life in the long run.
End up saving their lives. It's important to be part of that process and identify those things early, if possible. It's important for themselves. It's important for their families.
And that's exactly, the VFW with our service office, what you guys are doing day in and day out is not only helping them through the process with the VA, but when they get those exams, you hear a lot about sharks, the people that are taking advantage of our servicemen and women throughout the nation, charging them astronomical fees when they actually get their rating back, and they're taking portions of it and keeping it for themselves. One of the biggest reasons of joining a VFW is to have some of that representation so you don't get taken advantage of. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, our service office, and I was proud to be a VFW service officer for 43 years until I retired.
43 years, the thousands of people you've helped throughout the way. There's no more rewarding experience that you can have than to help a fellow veteran. But a veteran that has any condition, if he believes he's got a bad knee, bad back, bad attitude, or some chronic disease, and he believes it might be the result of his military service, he needs to talk to a service officer, whether it be a VFW service officer or a county service officer or an American Legion service officer or a DAV. You know what? I don't care. What I care about is that he talks to somebody that knows what they're talking about. There's a lot of people out there that will talk that have no idea what they're talking about. They need to talk to a knowledgeable service officer, regardless of the affiliation. Mm-hmm.
And there is no requirement for membership. They don't have to belong to the VFW or the American Legion or the DAV or the Vietnam Veterans of America in order to get assistance from one of them. All they got to do is walk in the door, pick up the phone, ask to speak to a service officer. We deal with it every day. Well, I'm not a member of the VFW. Well, you don't what? You don't have to be. You would, if you've got a medical issue that you believe is the result of your service, let us help you apply. Now, these claim sharks, God bless them, let us help you. And oh, by the way, you're only going to have to pay us 30% of what you get when you...
Right.
And if you get a retroactive check, we'll only take 30% of it, and the rest of it's yours. You know how much we take?
None.
0.
That 30% can mean a lot, especially with the back pay.
Can be a lot of money if and it's just wrong. Now, the law provides that in an appeal process, an attorney can legitimately help you, can help a veteran in the appeal process. The law does not provide that an attorney can legitimately help you in the initial claim process. But Congress, in its infinite wisdom, a number of years ago, took the penalty out of that provision. So now, if a attorney gets caught, he gets told, don't do that again.
With no penalty.
There's no penalty. So we have a lot of attorneys taking advantage of that the fact that there's no penalty, and offering their services to veterans in the initial claim process and charging them fees to do it, when in fact a veteran can obtain the same assistance with no charge whatsoever from somebody that knows what they're talking about and has their interests at heart.
And so if you're out there and you're thinking about going to an attorney, please don't. Go to your county service officer or go to one of our veteran service organizations. There's many of them out there, right, and they will do it at a zero cost.
74 counties in the state of Michigan have a county service officer program.
74.
74. Out of the 81 counties, I think it's 81 counties in Michigan, 74 of them have county service officer programs. Contact them. And in many of those county service offices, one of our representatives, whether it be the VFW or the DAV or the American Legion or the Vietnam Veterans of America, many of those county offices have relationships with our offices. And there's no end to the resource available to you if you reach out.
Well, I hope they do reach out.
I hope they do. And the VFW service office, I'll give them a plug. Their telephone number is 313-964-6510. And if you want to know the closest person to you that's available to help you, you call that number and they will refer you to the closest office available to you.
So if you hear that, guys, you could play it back, you can write it down, but I hope any veteran that thinks they have some disabilities or something from their service, they write that number down and just make that phone call. It can only do anything but help you. It can never be a non-benefit to you to know more about what's going on in your life or with your disabilities or things that happened after the service. And so one last thing, I know the Eaton Veterans Home, the
VFW
National Home. So we just hit our 100 years.
Yep.
Of doing that. You guys are in the middle of building new houses, a few new houses over this last year.
Yep.
What can you tell us about the National Home?
Well, the National Home admitted its first family in January of 1925. Was authorized by the VFW in the fall of 1924 and was incorporated in the state of Michigan. And the very first family in January of 1925 came to the National Home was a widow with 7 children. And the VFW National Home for Children was in its infancy a place for widows and children of veterans that for whatever reason could not, maybe they were deceased, maybe they were diseased, they couldn't take care of their family. And through the Depression years, the homes built up. And between 1925, when the first home was built, and the first home was the original farmhouse that was on the property that was donated to the VFW for that purpose. And the first home was actually built by the VFW of Michigan and is called the Michigan House. And a lot of folks don't know that the legislature of Michigan made a donation. They funded a large portion of the construction of that very first home.
Wow.
So the state of Michigan stepped right up, saw the need, recognized the need, appreciated the need and the work that was going to be done, and participated in that construction of that very first home. And over the years, 38 homes were built.
Wow.
And now we're up to, I think it is 45 homes.
45 homes. And I know that when we went to that grill out or barbecue, it was celebrating their 100th year, and they were talking about how they've got them almost all filled with veterans and their families, helping them
the
transition.
The program has changed over the years. And in about 2005, we had a major decision by the Board of Trustees of the VFW National Home for Children that said, up to then, you had to be either the child or the surviving family member of a veteran. And we said, you know what? We're not serving veterans the way we should be. We need to change our programming. We need to change our thought processes. And 20 years ago, they started a program to admit to the National Home families, to include the veteran. And initially it was veterans that were involved with VA in voc rehab. And after a while, after a couple of years, we need to change that. We got veterans that just need help. Maybe they're not involved with voc rehab. Maybe they've already been through voc rehab, and they still need some help. We need to open up, and they did. And the current programming, if you're a veteran with a family, and you need a hand up, we're not going to give you a darn thing, but we're going to help you. We're going to give you a hand up. And you can get up to 5 years of housing. While you're in that 5 years of housing, you're going to work your butt off. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to be... their mission is to prepare every veteran that enters that program to leave as a successful member of society, that when you leave, you're going to be able to self-support yourself and your family. And they're doing that every day. And if there's a veteran out there with a family that says, I just need some help, call the VFW National Home for Children. They will help you. And that number is 517. I wish I hadn't started that. 663-1521. That's 517-663-1521, the VFW National Home for Children, and they will help you.
Yeah, I've been out to that facility, and it's just, they're doing such great work. And I've known some of the veterans and their families that have went through that program, like Brian McDaniels,
yeah,
who's now actually kind of running some of those programs and taking that head on. And it is
Brian
just
is
awesome.
A beautiful example. I'll tell you what, you mentioned Brian Daniels. Brian lived at the VFW National Home as a child.
Really?
Really. Brian Daniels lived at the National Home as a child. When his family left the National Home, he joined the service. Lost a foot in service. Severely wounded. Came back, and was a businessman, had his own business, was active in the community, and found that he was missing something. And he went back to the National Home now as the director of community outreach for the VFW National Home. He's a spokesman for the VFW National Home, but he has lived the VFW National Home. He knows what it can do for children and for families that need that help because he lived it.
There's nothing better than hearing stories like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's motivating.
He's a success story from the National Home because he knows what it meant to have that umbrella of assistance for he and his family when he was just a kid.
Yeah.
And then to be able to go back and give back to the National Home, doing what he's doing now, it's a joy to see. It really is. As a VFW member that supports the National Home, and with programming and with dollars, things that we do as an organization to support that facility, and to see that somebody that we supported as a child think enough about it to come back as an adult and say, I want to give back.
There needs to be more of that around the United States today.
Yeah.
And so, Barry, I want to thank you for coming on Warfighters United. You know, you are a true American hero, a patriot to a lot of us. I know just being a part of the VFW for the last 20 years, I've always came to you for advice or help when it comes to running my club, or now it's going to be junior vice commander of District 9 and moving my way up. And the knowledge that you hold is essential to us moving forward. And, you know, I am thankful, just as I know everybody else at the VFW is thankful, that you're there working on our behalf.
Well, Eric, I don't know, we've known each other for what, about 8-10 years now?
Yes, sir.
And to see the success and the dedication that you've had to your family, to your local VFW post that, and by the way, Eric won't tell you this, but Eric is leading the state. His post is leading the state in membership growth. His little post is number 1 in the state in membership growth today. And he won't brag on that, but I will. And and to assume some leadership role in the district, and it's a pleasure to see you as a young veteran, and I can, in my age, I can call you young. To see a young veteran such as yourself embrace the mission and the vision of the VFW, it's a joy to see, and I'm very, very pleased to see your dedication. It's heartwarming, and I very much appreciate the opportunity and to speak with you today on this program.
Well, I definitely don't want it to be the last time either, because as you know, we start changing things with the legislation and some of the veteran, the service office. So June 25th, you can call in and dedicate a song for $25 to Q106 all day from 10 to 6. And all of that money is going to go towards the VFW service office that helps us with our disabilities. It helps our families out. They will stop at nothing to make sure that we get what we're deserving of. And you know, you've been a huge part in taking the Veteran Service Office where they are for the last 43 years. I said 40 earlier. I cut you short a couple of years, but you know, it is a vital role for our veterans, in moving forward in the future. And so, Barry, thank you very much for coming on Warfighters United. If you guys want to learn more, we have our website. It's warfightersunited.com. We have Warfighters United podcast on Facebook as well. And everything that we talk about, there's hyperlinks on those web pages to where, like, if you wanted to go to a 7-day transitional program, or you wanted to call the VFW or the American Legion or the 22 Project with traumatic brain injury help, that stuff is all on there, as well as educational benefits and a lot of other things to help veterans succeed. So look up warfightersunited.com, and we'll talk to you next week.